The Word of God says to humble ourselves and that God will exalt us in due time. And that's exactly what we see here in Genesis 41. We see a man who remained humble, Joseph. We see a man who, despite the affliction and the toil and the tribulation that he faced, being sold by his brothers into slavery and going from a slave in an officer's house to a wrongly accused man in jail. And then from there, a forgotten man in jail. And sure enough, God exalted him in due time. Because now Joseph, by the end of Genesis 41, he's second in command in all of Egypt, just under Pharaoh. So he goes from a prisoner to second in command in all of Egypt. Talk about a promotion. That promotion wasn't going to happen in Potiphar's house. That promotion wasn't going to happen back in Israel with his brothers. But if you remember, God gave him a dream. He gave Joseph a dream, and Joseph clung to the vision that God gave him for his life, that he would be a leader, and that one day people would come to him and bow to him, including his brothers. And we see now, as written in this chapter, bow your knees to Joseph. I mean, it's quite a story, a true story, a narrative, so to say. You know, these are not fairy tales. These are not fairy tales. This is recorded history, folks, and this is God's history. This is what God has done and what he's still doing today. Folks, if we humble ourselves before God, if we take the position of servant, if we trust him with our lives, despite the waves and the wind and the storm and the raging seas around us, if we just look at God and his promise in our lives, God will exalt us in due time. He will exalt us in due time, but we often we see a demotion, or we see darkness, or we see trouble, and we think, what has God done? God has forgotten about me. Oh no, what did I do wrong to deserve this? Nothing. Maybe nothing. Maybe this is exactly where God is leading you next. Because he has somewhere, it's not your end. It's not where you're going to end up in the end. But it's where you got to go through to get there. You know, there's a couple things that I want to really call out here in this chapter. And now I am blanking a little bit on them. But I just think it's remarkable. I just think it's remarkable to see how Joseph went from being, you know, I don't want to say the runt of his family, but kind of the one that his brothers hated because of the favoritism in his family, you know, I guess, to now he's in a foreign land and he's leading and he's successful too. He's successful. He accurately interpreted the dreams, and God is bringing to pass what he said he would. And what's crazy is God did not speak this dream to Joseph. He spoke this dream to Pharaoh. 2 dreams. The dreams that Joseph had to interpret. See, look at God's timing. The man in jail, the butler, he was sent there, and he met Joseph at that time. That was supposed to happen. And it was all part of God's plan to get Joseph to where he is. And that was all part of God's plan eventually over time to get to Jesus Christ. Look at the planning, the intricate planning of our God and what he is doing. Everything has a purpose. Everything. And we have to be, he works through unbelievers. He works through people who are not part of the promise, who are not saved. Look at Pharaoh. He speaks to Pharaoh in dreams. If he could speak to Pharaoh in dreams, he could speak to you, and he could speak to your life. As a believer, as someone, maybe you're seeking God, if he could speak to Pharaoh, who had all these idols and all these false gods, he could speak to you. Now, mind you, it was to glorify God, the reason he spoke to Pharaoh. It was to glorify God. It was to exalt Joseph, really, which would glorify God. But wow, just wow. God works all things together for the good of those who love him. Doesn't he? Man, I'm just so inspired. I'm just so inspired. Genesis 41, I'm just so inspired right now to really persevere. I'm inspired to persevere. I'm inspired to endure. I'm inspired to trust God no matter what I see. Man, that's inspiring. Because I know he's there. And I know he has a promise to me. And it's not all going to look the same. But I'm just inspired. So I hope this inspires you. God bless you guys.